afternoon, New Mexico educators. Thank you so much for joining our webinar this afternoon. While we're waiting for people to join, if you would just pop in the chat and let us know where you're from. I'm calling in from Las Cruces. It looks like we have somebody from Roswell. Where else? Oh, we've got someone from calling in from Pampa, Texas. Welcome, Kelly from Pampa.
Wow.
Anybody else? Someone from Santa Fe, it looks like too. Okay, great. Well, I'm going to, before I turn things over to Greg, just a couple of housekeeping tips for you. If you have questions anytime during the webinar, feel free to click on the chat icon and pop those into the chat, and either Greg will be answering them or I'll read them out at the end for him, but we want to make sure you get any questions you have answered. Also, watch for a follow-up email tomorrow that'll have a recording of this webinar. So don't worry about taking copious notes. We'll send you the recording, and we'd love for you to share that recording with any of your colleagues that weren't able to join. So feel free to do that, and then I'll also throw in a certificate of attendance. So in case you can use that for PD credit at your school, you'll have that as well. Okay. So, and then before I turn things over to Greg, we have a couple of folks from your New Mexico sales team. Katie Gentry Funk is your account executive, and Kelly Simpson is a sales associate that works with Katie. You'll see both their faces throughout the upcoming science adoption. We're working hard at getting everything ready for you. Katie, is there anything you want to say to them before we turn things over to Greg?
Just thank you for joining, and we know it's a long day, so to join an afternoon webinar, we're super excited. We attended the New Mexico Science Teachers Association conference up in Farmington last weekend. Had a great crowd, a lot of great engagement and excitement, so we're looking forward to spending more time together on this whole webinar series that runs through middle of November, and getting a chance to actually have Greg and some of the science team come in regionally to do some events this spring and next fall as we gear up for the science review. So thank you, and thank you all for joining.
Yes, thanks for being here. All right. Well, without further ado, let's get our special guest here started. Greg is one of our science content specialists that works all over the country. And so we're really excited that he could take time out of his busy schedule to join us today. Greg, take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, team. I am so happy to be here. As I was sharing with my colleagues earlier, for all of you that are watching, I live in Portland, Oregon, where we've got a nice rainy day here, kind of some fall weather is kicking in. But one of my absolutely favorite states, and I don't say this with everybody I work with, is New Mexico. Your state is so gorgeous. So anytime I get to come there and spend time, more than just even a day or two, but actually just explore the land, that is a happy day and a happy week in my life. So I hope to be able to see some of you as we move through this science adoption. I was a former teacher myself, so I have been born and raised in the Portland area where I still live now. And I was a teacher here, and I taught sixth grade. I taught sixth grade in a K through 6 school. And one of the things that I did not do very well when I was a sixth grade teacher was teach literacy at the same time that I was teaching science. I don't even know if I taught science that well, let's be honest. When we think about the new standards and expectations based on research that have come out, man, I sure wish a lot of that had been provided to me, and I had been aware of it and done some of the research myself. I think my students would have had a greater outcome. But it was back to literacy, as this is the purpose of you even signing up and for this particular webinar. If we have an opportunity while teaching science during the day to also build and enhance and reinforce and reiterate all the literacy that we're teaching as well, why wouldn't we do that? And the answer is we can. So that's what I want to show you a little bit about today, about some best practices and also how it connects specifically to the curriculum that I get to work with as well now, and my colleagues do, which is, of course, Amplify Science. So the objectives for the next, 30, 45 minutes, we'll see how we do here. Basically 3 big ideas, kind of identify some best practices. Teachers, I'm sure you're doing these things in the classroom already. And you're the experts. I'm not trying to act like I know your students or your classrooms any more or any better than you all do. But I do want to show you throughout the course of that some examples of how a top tier science curriculum, which absolutely is Amplify Science, it is hands down the most powerful, research-based, student-centered, and most impactful science curriculum I've ever come across, how it's built on NGSS, and how through that we can really enhance literacy instruction and improve those scores. And then I want to give you some free stuff too. Who doesn't like free stuff that you can take away right away and maybe start using in your classroom? Think back. Hey, think back. Now, I was just kind of referencing that when I was thinking about the way I used to teach, or certainly even farther when I was a 6th grade student or 2nd grade student myself. What did that classroom look like? I don't think it looked like this specifically. I'm not that old. I'm old, but I'm not that old. Not that that man is old, but clearly the picture is old, just for the record. Right. So if you were with me right now, or if maybe when I get to see you in person, we can go around and just articulate some things that you observe there. But maybe you observe, first of all, a chalkboard. I don't see a lot of engagement there. Looks pretty much teacher centered. Maybe there is more student interaction. We don't really know that throughout the day. Yeah, where can I get one of those shirts? Right. I mean, just the way he's dressed. I don't know about any of you, if there's any male teachers on. I don't wear a tie that much anymore, which I kind of miss. I kind of like dressing up, honestly. But yeah, it just looks a little bit different. Or I think about this thing right here, that Scantron test, the way that we assess students, where it's always multiple choice or right or wrong answers, not as much inquiry-based or research-based or formative assessments as we go along, or incorporating literacy. So in light of that, let's just look at a next generation science classroom. No sound, just observe here. Think about what you see as you watch this film. This is just over the course of about 20 minutes. One of our film crews went in to a science classroom where there was actual students, you can see, using Amplify Science. So this is Amplify Science in action. I'm gonna get out of the way for a minute and just let you observe. Think about what you see there. If you want to write some things in the chat box, like what do you observe that's a little bit different than maybe what would have been happening in that last class as well? Any ideas? Yeah, someone just said doing, like there's a lot of hands-on activity. We certainly didn't see that in the other classroom as well. Look at what resource the students have there. That's called an investigation notebook, where students have the opportunity to write and to read like a scientist. So just a lot of different things there that are happening than what we're accustomed to perhaps in more traditional ways of teaching. If I was to ask you, hey, let's come up with 5 verbs of what is going on in that particular classroom. Lots of interaction. I love that. I just got a response in the chat. Lots of interaction. Absolutely. Students are doing things. And to that last comment about lots of interaction between the students, you saw kids talking to each other. It wasn't a teacher at the class of the room or at the front of the room just giving instructions all the time. There was reading, there was writing, and our final verb that we often use with Amplify Science is visualization. That can happen using a model or technology or videos, just observing things that we otherwise wouldn't be able to see in person. I always give the example of like the rotation of the Earth. Right? So like I can't go outside and make the Earth spin quicker than it already is, but sometimes we can use technology or a simulation to allow us, especially students, be able to see that in action and the effects of the rotation of the Earth and the sun. So doing hands-on activities, you can see here. Here's a little example from grade 3 where students have been asked to figure out a way to make this paperclip levitate. You can see some of the solutions. Talking, collaboration. We have these routine cards throughout, very explicit instruction. This ties to the literacy part. Very explicit instruction throughout science to prompt students and teach students how to think silently, how to draw out your ideas. What does it mean to turn and talk to a partner before we share that with the class? Things like that. Probably routines that you're already doing, but maybe not doing in science. Shared listening. What does that mean? I just got to see this in action myself. I was recently in Florida. I got to teach an Amplify Science lesson myself in person. It was recorded. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But part of the lesson that I taught in 5th grade, it was about matter and understanding how matter works. Part of that lesson involved this very routine that you're seeing right here. Reading. Think about this. Here's one reader from a book called Forces All Around, which is authored by our by our authorship team, our partner called the Lawrence Hall of Science. Again, we'll talk more about that in a minute too. But when we read, we're reading for a purpose here. It's not just a story. It is a good little story, but we're also reading to gather information, to research like a scientist, to gather evidence. Maybe students are prompted there to look at those particular images and find evidence of where there might be motion or what might be causing a force, things like that. Notice these can also be played audibly for you. It's something a lot of teachers ask us right away. Is there a read aloud function? There is. They're also in Spanish as we go along. So here's that actual book in the context of a slideshow, which supports every single lesson. Every lesson comes with a Google slideshow. It's so cool. Or a PowerPoint slideshow. And slide by slide, we're going to break down that book and compartmentalize it to make it very accessible for all the kids. And you can see here, we're reading this book looking for evidence of force. So using those literacy skills, maybe some shared reading, partner reading, we'll talk about that in just a minute, in the context of this science investigation. By the way, we also have a YouTube playlist where there's a real person reading all of these books for us. So lots of ways to access this text as well. I wanted to share that because sometimes we think about substitutes, or what if a student misses class? A lot of different solutions that we've fortunately already thought of to hopefully make your life a little easier. That's that reading part. Now we're thinking about writing. Every unit in Amplify Science K through 5 comes with what's called an investigation notebook. No longer is there that print hardbound textbook for a student, which has generally informational text. If students are going to learn and think and act like a scientist, why not have them read like a scientist, read articles, read stories, and then annotate and fill in the blanks and use graphic organizers just like a scientist would. So I'm clicking through some various shots right here and examples of what might be in an investigation notebook. Those exist in print, but they also exist digitally. So if you're looking at this thinking, I like that, I'm in a one-to-one classroom, I really want my kids on devices, or they're comfortable being on devices, then you can see the text that's on the left side of your screen. Anything in that investigation notebook is also duplicated with full parity on the right side as well. So if you want to have that interaction digitally, you can do that as well. So do talk, read, write, and then visualize with those simulations. Every unit, grades K1 and 2, folks, if you're teaching grades K1 and 2, over the course of a year, you get 3 units of study. Every unit has 22 lessons. Grades 3, 4, 5, you get 4 units, and that covers all of the standards. We're going to engage students with a real world phenomenon right at the beginning. Like in kindergarten, they get to take on the role of a pinball engineer. How cool is this? And they actually get to make a pinball machine as they learn about how pinball machines allow people to control the direction and strength of forces on a ball. So we're getting some of those early principles. I'm going to skip ahead a couple grades. Grade 3, they take on the role of a civil engineer as they investigate a floating train. And they think about, there's this train going along. It actually exists, an actual floating train, and it moves along, raises, lowers without touching anything. How does that happen? So that's the phenomenon that carries that storyline over the course of an entire unit. Grade 5, they get to take on a role of an astronomer and analyze different stars on ancient artifacts and learn about all that. All those different modalities of learning that I just kind of went through, do talk, reading, writing, visualizing, that all plays into the course of the unit where kids are gathering evidence from a lot of different sources and then doing this on that third part right there, constructing an increasingly complex explanation. This is an iterative process as students move through that unit. And then at the very end, they really show you as a teacher evidence that they've got it, that they understand those different learning principles along the way by applying what they've learned to something brand new. Data matters. Don't take my word for it, right? I mean, maybe I sound convincing or maybe I sound passionate because I absolutely am. I've seen this in action and I've seen it work. We've also done research, and the Lawrence Hall of Science, who is this organization that has been writing content for decades, and they, before Amplify Science even came to fruition, they did, I think, 7 years of research. They did field testing. They did so much work to make sure that this is an effective curriculum that we're going to put in front of kids. And what they found, especially with literacy, are these results right here: reading comprehension, science vocab, and science content knowledge. Not just through the reading part, not just through that investigation notebook, but because students are accessing that content in so many different modalities of learning, The comprehension, the vocab, that content knowledge goes up. The writing goes up. Look at that clarity. Look at the difference there between use of evidence. It's that contextual language and that story that supports that comprehension as students move along. And then a lot of English learners, boy, these results jump up as well. As of course, we're all English learners, but some students in your classes maybe are learning 2 languages. So extra challenges there. There's a language that they're not familiar with, that they may not speak at home. So if they're at school learning science and able to access that text through these different modalities of learning, wouldn't those scores improve? And this shows evidence that it does. Disciplinary literacy, I love this. So truly integration, that's what we've been talking already, is these integrations of different principles as we go along. There are 4 principles that have been laid out. The content that I'm going to share here, I've got these great documents that I'm going to put, that I've already put in a link for you, and I'm going to show you that link towards the end of our time today. But these 4 principles, think about if maybe you're doing these already, or if these are new to you, or they're familiar, or if you agree, or maybe you disagree. And I want you to let us know, you know what, this one, yes, I'm not sure this is necessary. Here's the first one. Students acquire literacy expertise through the pursuit of science knowledge. True. And by engaging in science and engineering practices. Okay, pretty straightforward there. That's how they develop and acquire that expertise. Number 2, attention to this instruction should begin as soon as kids enter school and continue throughout each grade. Shouldn't just start in middle school, shouldn't just start in 4th grade, but why not at kindergarten? Give students this attention to various modalities of learning and explicit literacy instruction as they go along. I love this one. Not all kids come to this particular principle on a level playing field, unfortunately. But we can do things and allow the school to be a community, because this is so key to really acquiring some expertise in the literacy. And then argumentation, we see this more, and actually this is explicit as we move through the grades. Argumentation, some of those principles and skills that are involved in that, how to debate, those are some central enterprises of science. And thus, as it says, these practices should be the focus of reading, writing, and talking in science. I wanted to show this to you. So I'm going to show you several examples as we go along here from Amplify Science in Action. And as I go through here, so here's a grade 5 modeling matter. Before I go any further, I just want to give you context about what you're looking at. I mentioned earlier, every single lesson in Amplify Science, every grade, every lesson, every unit comes with a Google slideshow. I don't want to make it sound this simple because it takes more expertise than just this, but sometimes I've said plug and play. You know, you open up your slideshow like I'm displaying right here, you plug it in, and you've got an easy to use science curriculum. It's not just easy to use. It's not just fluff, though. There's so much fidelity and rich content, as you are already seeing evidence of. So I kind of hate that expression, plug and play, but I do want to let you know that every lesson is able to be supported for you in that manner. That makes teaching a new curriculum so much easier, because you don't need that teacher's manual every step of the way to walk you through and to learn, what do I do here? What do I do here? It's all laid out for you right in this Google slideshow. So in this one particular activity, you can see right there, readers are going to make some inferences. And then every slide just walks you as a teacher through the various steps of this lesson. So you might even say out loud here, hey, scientists make observations and inferences. Remember, an inference is something you figure out based on evidence. All right, this is 5th grade, and this clearly is not the first time that we've been introduced to inferences. So again, just that word itself, I mean, how amazing, because that might be a word that you're incorporating and introducing in literacy. Here it is in the context of science. So you can see, this is just the idea here. I'm not going to go through every slide and read every detail and do every activity, but I want you to see a little bit of how Amplify Science, again, elevates the literacy instruction that you're doing, reflecting on the book. I love these little icons, by the way. You're going to see, as I go through various lessons today, you're going to see different icons. There's one person, one little figure with a hand up. That's a prompt for you as a teacher that this particular part of the activity is essentially you as a teacher leading that. Maybe you're asking a question. How did you answer the second question? What helped you make that inference? And so you're going to call in volunteers. There'll be other times where there'll be 2 students with a hand next to each other. That's a prompt for kind of a turn and talk. Look at that. There's one right there. So what are some ways that scientists and break it down, the book, separated substances using differences in the molecules of the substances? It doesn't even say it on the screen, but I, as a teacher, know, think about ease of use by that prompt right there, that before students share their answers with me, I'm going to ask them to take about 30 seconds turn to a partner and think about that and answer with a partner what that might be. Maybe consider that shared listening activity that I showed you earlier. All right, so here we are moving along. All right, instructional approach. Let's move to a different aspect, and specifically what Amplify and the Lawrence Hall of Science do to really make this approach come alive. Beginning and young readers, as you know, I'm sure there's some teachers on here that are going to teach or are teaching kindergarten, first grade, but we want to reach all those students, especially at those lower grades when they're just starting out. Think about that second principle. Every student from a young age has got to get access and introduction to this high level text and these ideas for effective literacy. So one way of meeting these needs is to strategically deploy 3 different modes of reading within lessons and units of instruction. I'd love to pause here. I'd love to see all of you in like, well, I'm in my house, but I'd love to see all of you in my house. Let's all have like lunch together or snacks, we'll just call it, together. And I could ask you, what are some different modes of reading within lessons and units of instruction that you're already doing? We've kind of boiled it down to 3: read aloud, shared reading, and then maybe I bet if I gave you a minute, I'm just going to pause here. And even if you're just listening and you're not adding anything to the chat, that's fine. Think about what that third one might be based on those first 2. Read aloud, teacher, shared, together. That third one is partner reading. All right, so these 3 different modes are implemented throughout K-5 literacy. K-5, read aloud really comes alive and is used prominently and predominantly throughout that grade. This is where the teacher reads, students primarily listen. That teacher is going to model fluent and expressive reading, demonstrate strategic reading, thinks aloud, really supports that student as they're building that comprehension. All right, I'm going to go to something. I want to show you this. This is a colleague of mine, Cassandra, and she recently went with me to Florida, and she taught a lesson to first graders. And I want you to just watch and observe a little bit further.
Our question is, how can they survive in the wild? We're going to learn more about that through the book. Yes. This book is called Tortoise. Sorry. Take a look. Tortoise. What do you see? Now you're sitting in a small group. You have a couple people beside you. Once you've seen the picture, I want you to tell somebody beside you what you see. On the tortoise, we can answer your question in just a minute. Tortoise, what do you see? So everybody, we're going to look at a tortoise, but a tortoise is different than a sea turtle. Yeah. Right? A sea turtle lives in the sea. Well, when I'm speaking, we're listening. If you have a question, you can raise your hand, but we're going to answer questions like this.
I'm going to fast forward it just a little bit. I love that classroom management is a reality for everybody, right? Poor Cassandra right there. This is her first time with this particular group of students. Just like I had my first time with the kids that I taught in 5th grade. Let me fast forward it and see if I can see her doing a little bit of the reading.
Very good. We're going to learn about tortoise parts. Questions before we get started, Nathan?
What do tortoises do?
Make a picture in our mind. Can you make a picture in your mind? Yes, a tortoise.
I love that. A picture in your mind. What is that? Do, talk, read, write, visualize. They're visualizing there as they are introduced to this particular book. And I wanted to just give an example of Cassandra as she's preparing to do the read aloud version. Again, this is 1st grade, one of the first units in this particular grade. And she's got a big book there, which 1st grade, you got those big books. Kindergarten, we got those big books. And notice also, by the way, right, it's also on the screen. So just going back to that slide, I just want all of you who are new and maybe seeing what Amplify Science is all about for the first time. You've got that book projected on the screen, but then you, of course, have the print version as well. Let's see if we can catch a little bit more.
And so he uses his mouth to eat. A tortoise has a long neck. No, what do you think he uses his neck for? Do you know?
Yeah.
All right. Oh, look at that right there. What did you see when you visualized the tortoise using its long neck? So anyway, just a nice example there. I thought I wanted to share with you about about a shared reading right there. All right, so I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint here. That was the read aloud where the teacher's modeling, as you saw Cassandra right do. Let's look at another one, shared reading. So this is where teachers and students interact with that book together, which we actually saw a little bit of shared reading right there. Cassandra was doing that, really involving the students as well, where students are observing and then actively joining in discussion. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, that might have been a better example of shared reading than just the read aloud. I think there was an example earlier in that particular lesson that I had seen Cassandra do where she was doing that read aloud, but I love how she immediately shifted into this shared reading. I think she got more engagement too from that group of students that she was seeing for the first time. I love that third point there. Teacher explicitly guides students to understand that science informational texts are organized in a way designed for investigation and building vocabulary. That's exactly what was happening. Kids didn't know it at the time, but that's what happened in that particular example right here. Partner reading, this is that higher level where the teachers and students, or the teacher and students get to interact with that book together. The kids observe the teacher actively, the kids do actively join in discussion and then practice using a specific strategy. So this is also the teacher is going to explicitly guide students to understand that science informational texts are organized in a way, guess what, that builds, that is designed for building vocabulary and investigation. So partner reading right here. Here's a little part from, this is Break It Down. This is another lesson, and you can see some parts right here. So where students are encouraged to read pages 4 through 9. Look at the prompt again, right? So there's 2 students. It kind of looks like they're giving a high five to each other, but it's more of like raising their hand. So it says read pages 4 through 9 and think about how the text connects to what you already know about mixtures. Let me tell you this. In Amplify Science K through 5, we provide, so there's 5 books, there's 5 texts that are part of every unit, sometimes 6 actually, 5 to 6. And for that book, we provide in a curriculum bin 18 copies of that book. Well, why 18 copies? Do we just live in this dream world that every class has only 18 students? We don't live in that dream world. We sometimes live in a dream world, right? It's kind of fun too. But no, the idea here with the books is at the very most, they're going to do partner reading with these books. So never in Amplify Science K through 5 are students ever being asked to take 5 minutes and read pages 4 through 9 on your own. That literally never happens, which almost is shocking to me because I can think of the number of times that I probably employed that strategy and practice and activity when I was teaching, which is, it's okay. It's not like my kids were ruined, but the instruction here is so research-based. Kids are going to learn better in these smaller page numbers, not reading the whole book at a time, but also when they get to read it with somebody else. It really builds that comprehension. So that's why we only have 18 copies of every book in those curriculum bins. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to scroll through here. Here we're becoming introduced to inferences again. Here's a screenshot of a book. And so the teacher might be reading this aloud here. And then we're also at the same time, we're taking that text and taking the investigation notebook or using the online platform to gather that evidence as we read it. You can see there, we'll use clues from the text, from the images, from the captions about what we already know about molecules. Disciplinary literacy in action right here. Some more questions, some more prompts, really building that collaborative classroom, as I think you saw a picture of as at the very beginning right here too. Readability. Let's shift briefly to readability. I want to show you another example of a classroom before we go here, but I also just want to talk about this text design for accessibility. And again, if these little facts and figures and like those 4 different practices or these different reading things are things that you're thinking, I'm going to take notes about this or you know, jot this down and think about it later. I'm going to share with you a document that's all about literacy and science that kind of summarizes all this in text format for you too. But to this point, readability levels for each book should be based on the mode of reading used to introduce the book. For example, a book designed for read aloud, who's doing the read aloud? The teacher, can have a higher readability level than one designed for partner reading. Wouldn't that make sense? So therefore, wouldn't it be great if there was an organization or a company or a publisher that put out a curriculum that put this much thought into what students are going to be reading K-5? That's part of why I'm so proud to work for Amplify. After each book is read for the first time, students should have then further opportunities to interact with the words and images as they figure out the answers to the questions. It's not hit it and forget it. It's not like we're going to read this one page or this one story. Great, I got it. There's my 3 pieces, and I've annotated this, and I've gathered this evidence. I'm done with the book. You said there was 5 books. Well, I'm done with one day. No, we're going to come back to that multiple times for different purposes as we work through that. Kindergarten, we're going to focus on read aloud and shared reading, those first 2 right there that you kind of saw in action from Cassandra. We're going to first hear it, and then we're going to encounter similar language and vocabulary as the teacher guides their participation during that shared reading. Needs of plants and animals. Here's kindergarten, right? So think back to what you were doing in kindergarten, or maybe other classes that you've observed in kindergarten. There's a book in kindergarten that we have called the Science Walk. And before that book is introduced, we just look at some images here. And the teacher might just read this. We need to be scientists and figure out what has changed in the area. And I didn't really give you the context right here, but they're comparing this one particular piece of land that over time has changed. It used to be this, and now it's this. So students are making some comparisons. Scientists do many things to help them learn about the world. So that's just a statement. Now we're going to unpack that. The one hand is up. So this is teacher-led. They might have this as a big book. You might have it not individually, but as partner. You might have this book passed out, and the students are simply just looking at the cover, being asked this question: what do you notice? We're not telling them anything. We're not saying, okay, look at this, we're going to do this. No, just what do you notice on the front cover? And there's no wrong answers there. Students might say a lot of different things. Our purpose, students, for reading is to find out what the scientists in this book did. So let's find out. Well, here's my friend Greg. Now, you might remember my name is also Greg, but on the same team that Cassandra and I are on, we have another Greg, if you can believe it or not. And this one, Greg, for his lesson, he got to teach kindergarten. And guess where he took his kids? He took his kids on a science walk. So I think we should observe a little bit of that science walk that he did. So let me switch over to this, and let me gather this. I'm going to close this one because over here I've got it ready to go. So let's watch Greg as he takes his walk. This might be right before he takes his kids outside.
Ready to go on our walk. Okay, so as we go in, remember the one thing I want you to do, I don't want you to see things and just keep it to yourself. I want you to be together, and I want you to tell someone what you're observing. So let's be very careful. There are some plants we can touch, but there's some plants we shouldn't touch. Okay, and if we see a caterpillar, should we touch it? No, that's very good. So let's go ahead in and let's observe using our science toolkit. You saw a lizard? Oh, everyone see the lizard? So we're going to use our eyes to see the lizard. Wow, we haven't even gotten in the garden and we've seen something already. So let's go ahead in. Here, let's open it this way. Do you see the 2 paths? So we'll stay on the path and walk around in the garden. Or talk about what you're seeing. What'd you find? Yeah. Yeah. Yes,
I love that while he was out there on his science walk, he was so blessed to have a train go by as well. So that kind of made me laugh at the time. But anyway, you just got to see what happens. I wish I could show you the whole thing. Because it's the reality of teaching, especially those younger elementary grades, is that you never know what you're going to get, right? So then this would be a follow. I love that we had that slide in there too. Did all of you see that slide that was the prompt? So the students were prompted with that particular question or task and activity as they went about that. So then this is some follow-up. Again, just allowing the students to explore and take a lot of that prior knowledge, take what they observe and then incorporate it right into the listening right there. So kindergarten, we're going to do that. Grade 1, we're going to develop that a little bit more complex. We're going to develop that skill of learning how to read words, strategies to understand as their reading levels increase as well. And instruction should include books specifically designed, of course, for partner reading, as well as the opportunities for the other two as well. Here's another few slides from one of the lessons where they're reading a book about 2 kids who observe the sky. All right. And we're asking them again, what do you notice? What predictions can you make as you go along? So just think about this literacy, this disciplinary literacy, literally built right into science, and how all of these skills and strategies would then only increase your feedback and your level of, or the student's level of understanding in actual ELA time as you go through there. Some really neat things here. So text design for accessibility, got that grade 1. And then certainly as we move through the rest of the grades, we're going to build on that foundational set that was in the earlier grades. We're going to read to support gathering evidence, learning about science ideas, those cross-cutting concepts like cause and effect, structure, those concepts that kind of cross over the different domains of science, and then become exposed to the work of real scientists and make those real world connections. We see that in every grade. That first grade science walk that you just did, making those real world connections right there in real life. Finally, the last lesson I wanted to share with you is here's a lesson from grade 3 where they learn about balancing forces. I showed you this book earlier. I wanted to show it to you one final time. And you can see this. We've been investigating to find out what makes an object start to move. We're going to gather more evidence by reading a book. They're going to use that investigation notebook, writing, reflecting as they have a purpose set for them. And then they're going to use that book to gather that evidence. And the teacher models this as they go along, and they look at forces, looking for ideas and examples of forces as they go along. They mark it up with sticky notes, all sorts of ideas and strategies built right in to make this as easy as possible for you. So if you want to see any more examples of these slideshows, certainly let us know. We'd love to be able to give you a demo account as well. That's something you can do easily, probably on your own or through us, because seeing is believing. It's one thing to hear a little, song and dance from me today about how literacy is really explicitly included within science instruction. We want you to see it for yourself. You can even try out lessons by yourself with your students. The Lawrence Hall of Science, as I mentioned, there's a little logo of them. We're so thankful and proud of them. We wouldn't be doing this. We don't have this curriculum without them. This is these lessons, those slideshows, those were not scripted out by people working behind a desk at Amplify that think they know what's best for your kids. They were written by researchers and experts and scientists and educators and parents that collectively work at the hall. And all along through that, we're really proud to address and have a curriculum built up that is built from the NGSS. Final thing, folks, I mentioned a website that I would share with you. Pretty easy to memorize, tinyurl.com/literacy within science. And when you go there, I can show you exactly that right now. I'm going to go back to my browser, and right here, I'm going to click on this guy, and I have it right up here. So this is where that link will take you. And I just wanted to show it to you because here you'll see 4 blocks of information. So if you want to see a flyer that really outlines in more detail what we talked about today in like disciplinary literacy and other topics, that's this flyer right here. If you want a brochure, if I shared anything with you just about the Amplify Science K-5 curriculum in general that kind of got you excited and you just want to know more about it, take a look at this right here. You can download these all to your own machine. And then if you want to see what every one of those books, we looked at so many books today, like that building or Balancing Forces book. We looked at the Science Walk book. If you want to read any of those in their entirety and see what other books are in there, check out that brochure right there. And then finally, I did put this in here as well. This document right here includes a lot of links to, or actually a link to all of those webinars. So if you want to watch that whole video that you just saw of either Cassandra or Greg or even me in 5th grade teaching that particular lesson, open up this document right here and you'll be able to watch it in 2 ways. You can watch the whole lesson being taught. And then we also did kind of a follow-up narration where we got together with a couple colleagues and almost talked over the instruction to narrate what we were doing and how it aligned to Amplify Science, why we were doing it, and how it aligned also certainly to NGS as we went along. So that was kind of a fun little project that we did. So if you want to look at those, you can certainly look at those. I'm going to finally return back to the PowerPoint and see right here and finish with this. I want to thank you so much. And I want to ask if there's any questions that are live, or ask my colleagues if they have any questions or if they have anything else that they want to share.
Thank you so much, Greg. And thank you. I've learned so much, and I really appreciate you putting all of those resources together in that jump share. If you'll make sure I get that link, what I'll do is just include it in their follow-up email. So that'd be terrific. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. So just to remind you, those of you that have joined live, to watch for an email that has the link that Greg just shared, as well as a certificate of attendance and the recording to the webinar. Like I said at the beginning, feel free to share that recording with anyone else, as well as the materials that are behind the link. And we advertised that we would award some winners. And I think what we're going to do today, Greg, because I'm feeling like everybody has been so attentive, is we will award everyone who joined a Amplify swag bag. So we'll put together some goodies for you from Amplify Science. And so we'll reach out to you to get your addresses and find out where you want us to mail those. But just a way to kind of kick off things here the year before the New Mexico science adoption. Thanks again, Greg, for being on. Thank you, everyone else. Enjoy your evening, and we'll see you at a future webinar. Take care.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.